In the ashes of one war he rose and gave birth to another. This is the story of Adolf Hitler and the hatred that nearly destroyed the world. Some shadows linger, refusing to dissipate with time. They stain the pages of history, a perpetual warning against the darkest corners of the human soul. The name Adolf Hitler, it's not just a name. It's a terrifying echo of humanity's capacity for cruelty and destruction. A man seemingly ordinary who, in just a few short decades, orchestrated a nightmare that consumed a continent and reshaped the world in fire and blood. But how? How did a failed artist, a seemingly insignificant individual, become the architect of the 20th century's most horrific chapter? What was the monster inside him, and how did its insidious influence not only consume a nation, but propel the world down a path of unimaginable hatred and suffering? Born in Braunau am Inn, Austria, in 1889, Adolf Hitler's origins were far from extraordinary, almost unremarkable. His childhood was marked by a complex, often volatile family dynamic. His father, Alois, was a strict authoritarian figure, prone to violent outbursts and demanding absolute obedience, a dominant presence that likely instilled in young Adolf a deep-seated fear of authority alongside a rebellious streak. Conversely, his mother, Clara, was doting, overprotective, and permissive, creating a stark contrast in his early development. This seemingly mundane family environment, far from the grand stage he would later command, nonetheless laid critical groundwork for a complex and deeply troubled psychology. These formative years in a small Austrian town contained the embryonic seeds of his later pathologies. But it was in the bustling, multi-ethnic melting pot of Vienna, where he moved at 18, that the seeds of his virulent ideology truly took root and began to fester. Here he was a struggling artist, repeatedly rejected by the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts, a humiliation that fueled a deep, burning resentment and a sense of personal failure. This period was crucial. Isolated, impoverished, and deeply discontented, he immersed himself in the city's underbelly of radical political thought. He absorbed the pervasive anti-Semitism that was rampant in segments of Viennese society, the fervent nationalist movements sweeping through Europe, and the distorted interpretations of social Darwinism. He found convenient scapegoats for his own failures, externalizing his personal frustrations onto entire groups of people. He began to see the Jews in particular as the embodiment of all that was wrong with modernity, with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and indeed with his own thwarted ambitions. This was where the intellectual poison began to seep into his worldview, forming the bedrock of his later genocidal fantasies.
For Hitler, languishing in Vienna, the outbreak of World War I in 1914 was not a tragedy to be mourned, but a profound and thrilling salvation. It offered an escape from his aimless existence, a chance for purpose and belonging. He volunteered eagerly for the Bavarian army, finding a sense of camaraderie and identity in the brutal trenches that he had never known in civilian life. He was a decorated dispatch runner, a foot soldier, often exposed to extreme danger, experiencing firsthand the visceral horrors of industrialized warfare, the constant shelling, the stench of death, the psychological toll of daily survival. This experience, paradoxical as it may seem, validated his deeply ingrained prejudices and rigid worldview, transforming abstract hatred into a concrete battlefield reality. But when Germany, despite its initial fervor, finally surrendered in 1918, a poisonous narrative began to fester in the defeated nation, the infamous stab-in-the-back myth, or Dolchstoßlegende.
This lie claimed that the German army wasn't defeated on the battlefield by superior force, but rather betrayed by internal enemies: Jews, communists, and the November criminals of the Weimar Republic, who signed the humiliating armistice. This narrative, a deliberate act of historical revisionism, became the cornerstone of Hitler's nascent political rhetoric. It was a potent, insidious weapon, allowing him to channel national humiliation, economic despair, and widespread disillusionment into a seething, directed resentment against scapegoated minorities. The war, and particularly its devastating conclusion, didn't temper his existing prejudices. It hardened his resolve, providing the perfect fertile ground for his extremist ideology to take root and flourish among a desperate populace looking for answers and someone to blame. In Munich, the aftermath of war left Germany reeling from a catastrophic combination of hyperinflation that rendered the national currency worthless, profound political instability with frequent changes in government, and widespread social unrest. This was the perfect breeding ground for radical ideologies, a chaotic environment where extreme solutions gained traction among a desperate and disillusioned populace. Hitler, newly awakened to a political calling, gravitated towards extremist groups. He eventually joined the nascent German Workers' Party, a small, insignificant group, which he, with his keen understanding of propaganda, soon strategized to rename the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party, giving it a more powerful, appealing, and nationalistic ring. Here, Hitler discovered what would become his most terrifying and powerful gift: an electrifying, almost hypnotic oratorical ability. He could articulate the public's grievances with raw passion, transforming their despair, anger, and humiliation into a directed, combustible rage. His voice, amplified by his carefully crafted rhetoric, became a powerful instrument of manipulation, an emotional tidal wave designed to sweep away reason. His failed beer hall putsch in 1923, an ill-conceived attempt to seize power through armed force, ironically provided him with an unexpected national platform during his subsequent trial. His impassioned speeches from the dock, widely reported, garnered him sympathy and recognition from right-wing circles across Germany. During his comfortable imprisonment in Landsberg, a strategic retreat rather than a punishment, he dictated Mein Kampf, a sprawling, rambling, and venomous manifesto. This wasn't just a memoir, it was a chilling blueprint for his future actions, outlining his racist worldview, his expansionist ambitions, and his detailed, chilling plan for world domination. Upon his release, recognizing the futility of seizing power through brute force, he rebuilt the Nazi Party. He transformed it from a fringe, disorganized group into a highly disciplined, ruthlessly efficient paramilitary force, leveraging sophisticated propaganda techniques, orchestrating escalating street violence against political opponents, and expertly exploiting the growing economic crisis of the Great Depression to secure more and more public support. The ballot box, he realized, offered a surer path to absolute power. The turning point, the point of no return for German democracy, arrived with shocking speed in January 1933. Through a series of shrewd, ruthless political maneuvers and backroom deals, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. But he wasn't content with merely sharing power. He craved absolute, unchallenged control. He dismantled democratic institutions with chilling efficiency. The infamous Reichstag fire, a mysterious blaze that engulfed the German parliament building just weeks after his appointment, provided the perfect pretext. Blaming communists without any credible evidence, Hitler exploited public fear and panic, invoking emergency powers under President Hindenburg, thereby suspending crucial civil liberties like freedom of speech, assembly, and the press. The chilling result was the passage of the infamous Enabling Act in March 1933. This wasn't merely a political coup. It was the legislative death knell for German democracy. It effectively granted Hitler dictatorial powers, allowing him to enact laws without parliamentary consent or presidential approval, bypassing the democratic process entirely. What followed was Gleichschaltung, the forced coordination or synchronization of every single aspect of German life under rigid Nazi control. Trade unions were abolished, replaced by a Nazi-controlled labor front. All other political parties were banned, leaving only the Nazi Party. Media was ruthlessly censored. News, radio, and cinema became propaganda tools. Education was completely indoctrinated, transforming schools into factories for loyal Nazi citizens. The Gestapo, the secret state police, enforced conformity with brutal efficiency, leading to arbitrary arrests, torture, and detention in newly established concentration camps. Even culture and art were purged of anything deemed un-German or degenerate, only permitted to exist if they served the Nazi agenda, promoting racial purity and nationalistic fervor. Dissent, any form of opposition, withered and died under the crushing weight of fear, intimidation, and the constant threat of state violence. German society, once a vibrant democracy, was systematically transformed into a totalitarian state, with every individual's life brought under the oppressive shadow of the swastika. With absolute power brutally secured at home, Hitler now turned his gaze outward, his megalomaniacal ambitions unchecked. He systematically and brazenly began to dismantle the Treaty of Versailles, the very agreement designed to keep Germany in check after World War I. He withdrew Germany from the League of Nations, signaling his contempt for international cooperation. The Rhineland, a demilitarized zone designed as a buffer, was brazenly remilitarized. Then came the Anschluss, the forced annexation of Austria into the Greater German Reich, and the subsequent aggressive demand for the Sudetenland, a German-speaking region of Czechoslovakia, under the false pretense of protecting ethnic Germans. These were direct violations of international law, open challenges to the global order. Yet, each audacious move, each act of aggression, was met with surprisingly little resistance from the Western powers, primarily Great Britain and France. Scarred by the unspeakable horrors and immense casualties of World War I, they desperately clung to a policy of appeasement. They hoped that by satisfying Hitler's escalating demands, by giving him what he claimed were his last territorial ambitions, they could somehow avoid another catastrophic global war. The infamous Munich Agreement, where British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain declared "peace for our time" after ceding the Sudetenland, epitomized this tragic naivete. But appeasement only emboldened the dictator. It signaled weakness, confirming Hitler's belief that the democracies were decadent and unwilling to fight. His ultimate objective, detailed in Mein Kampf, was not merely territorial expansion, but Lebensraum, living space, for the German people in the East. This chilling concept inherently meant the brutal subjugation, enslavement, and ultimate extermination of inferior races, particularly the Slavic peoples and Jews, to create an agrarian empire for Germans. The signing of the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, a cynical alliance for mutual gain, removed the immediate threat of a two-front war. Finally, the brazen invasion of Poland in September 1939, a lightning-quick blitzkrieg that shattered its defenses, delivered the final, undeniable blow to the illusion of peace. This act of unprovoked aggression plunged the entire world into its second global conflict in a single generation. The monster within had now unleashed its fury upon the world, and the true scale of its destructive ambition was about to become horrifyingly clear. As the war raged across Europe and beyond, consuming millions of lives, the chilling, destructive logic of Hitler's ideology manifested itself in its most horrifying and unspeakable form: the Holocaust. The final solution to the Jewish question wasn't a spontaneous act of wartime brutality or a chaotic eruption of violence. It was the meticulously planned, industrially executed, and systematically enacted murder of 6 million Jews, men, women, and children, alongside millions of Roma, LGBTQ+ individuals, disabled people, political dissidents, and countless others deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. It was a genocidal project born of racial hatred and fanaticism. From the initial persecution and ghettoization of Jewish communities across Nazi-occupied Europe, to the forced deportations in cattle cars, and finally, to the industrialized extermination camps like Auschwitz, Sobibor, and Treblinka, the hatred meticulously perfected in Hitler's diseased mind found its ultimate, horrifying expression. This was not merely an ancillary part of warfare. This was a deliberate, methodical campaign for the total eradication of entire peoples, executed with bureaucratic efficiency and chilling coldness. It represents an indelible stain on the conscience of humanity, a testament to what unchecked hatred and systematic dehumanization can lead to. It serves as the ultimate agonizing testament to the destructive power of unchecked hatred, a hatred not born of some abstract, unanalyzable force, but meticulously cultivated and manipulated by a single man and his fanatical followers. Hitler's inglorious end came in a desolate Berlin bunker in April 1945, a final act of cowardice as the Allied armies closed in around him. But his physical demise did not erase his terrifying, indelible legacy. The world was left with shattered cities, broken lives, and the profound, agonizing question of how such monstrous evil could have gripped a modern, civilized nation and plunged the entire globe into such an abyss of suffering and destruction. The monster within him, we realize, fed voraciously on desperation, on fear, on grievances, and on a terrifying, almost supernatural ability to manipulate the deep-seated prejudices and anxieties of others. His story is not just a chapter in history textbooks. It is a vital, enduring, and chilling warning for all generations. It is a stark reminder that hatred, if left unchecked, if allowed to fester and be exploited, possesses an explosive power to consume societies from within. It teaches us with painful clarity that democracy is not an immutable given. It is a fragile construct, constantly requiring vigilance and defense. It demands that we remain perpetually alert against the insidious creeping of fascism, anti-Semitism, racism, and all forms of intolerance. This vigilance is not merely an academic exercise or a historical footnote. It is a perpetual, necessary fight for the very soul of humanity. Because the echoes of that nightmare, the whisper of the monster, still circulate in the shadows, waiting patiently for us to forget, waiting for the opportunity to rise again.